Everything is Fine by Great 78. Chapter 12. Mistakes. The well-dressed woman standing in the doorway, who had ordinarily looked entirely unruffled by anything, seemed beside herself with anxiety. Ariel wrung her hands with visible agitation. "I'm not sure, but I fear I've made some kind of mistake. I'm afraid there's someone in the good place who isn't supposed to be here, and I think you can tell me who it is." Draco's brain went blank, every pixie abandoning him in his moment of need. It was Hermione who finally spoke up. Ariel, why would Draco and I be able to tell you who doesn't belong here?" Hermione asked nervously. Ariel answered, "It's simple. Draco is new here, and Harlow, you haven't really interacted with lots of our residents. I hardly saw you at the reception for Mr. Weasley, at his house, for instance. So both of you have a blank slate with no preconceived notions about the people living here." Yes, that's true," Hermione croaked out. Ariel nodded as if that settled it, and waved an arm theatrically. With a chime, a heavy book appeared. Despite the gravity of the situation, Draco still noticed the witch lean forward interestedly at the sight of an unfamiliar book. "Here is a biography of everyone here. It has a bit about them, as well as their points totals from their time on Earth." "Points totals?" Draco asked warily. Ariel waved him off as though he'd just asked about something entirely trivial. "Just a breakdown of every good deed they did on Earth, weighed against every bad deed done by them." Hermione and Draco both eyed the book distrustfully. "I think perhaps we focus on the bottom ones, as everyone else should be above suspicion, I would think," Ariel went on. "Of course," Draco muttered, his bollocks contracting slightly at the thought of finding out his score in this blasted book. "Right, so here we have Richard Pryor and Jean Wilder. They both made it here, but only just. However, they're both so busy running the various restaurants, I'm not sure they'd have time to create such mischief." "Still, have you tried that oatmeal? Talk about committing a crime," Draco murmured. "What do you mean?" Ariel asked sharply, turning fully to look at Draco. "I eat there every morning." "It's only a crime that he doesn't make more varieties, is all Draco means," Hermione piped up. Ariel seemed mollified. "I'll pass on the word, then. In addition to those two, we have Luna Lovegood and a man named Ambrose Wimbley. Have you met either of them? Luna is the new resident for whom we had the reception the other night, just next door. She seems like a lovely woman." Ariel mused doubtfully. "We actually just met Ambrose this morning, in fact," Draco interjected quickly. "He seems like an all-right bloke." I confess, I don't know him very well. He keeps to himself, mostly. I take Tai Chi lessons from his soulmate Luciana. Such a lovely woman." Ariel smiled. "I didn't realize you do activities with residents, Ariel," Hermione said. Ariel nodded. "Most architects do not. They create a good place and then leave it to run itself, but I have to confess, this is my first one. It's almost like giving birth to a child of my own. I want to nurture it, to grow it into the best good place there is." Suddenly, Ariel gasped, hiding her mouth with one hand. "Oh no! What if I am the one who has ruined it?" "What do you mean?" Hermione asked. "Other good places don't have problems like this one. I know, because all of the architects meet periodically, and no one has ever mentioned having problems like this. What if I caused it?" Tears sprang to the lovely green eyes of the woman. Draco cleared his throat. "Ariel, I'm not a good place architect, and you are the only one I've met, so I don't know if the architects are capable of keeping secrets. But is it possible that some of the other architects perhaps don't reveal any problems they've encountered?" Her green eyes flew wide. "Surely not," she said. "What a thing to suggest!" I apologize," he said quickly. "I only thought that perhaps someone simply neglected to mention it, not that they were being purposefully deceitful." Ariel nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right, Draco. I appreciate your insight. I know you have a colourful past full of bravery and courage. It only makes sense that you have much wisdom to impart." Draco gave her a sidelong look, trying to determine if she was taking the piss out of him, but she seemed entirely guileless. "Right," he said slowly. Hermione interrupted, and Draco recognized a glint in her eye that reminded him of their time together at Hogwarts. "Actually, Ariel, we've just begun a book club of sorts. Like Draco said, we met Ambrose today and struck up a conversation about a book we'd all read, and we thought we'd like to get together with him tomorrow afternoon to discuss it further. And Draco talked a bit with Mr. Weasley at the reception. We didn't really speak much with Luna, but Draco and Mr. Weasley got on well. Perhaps he'd like to join our book club. We can get a feel for those residents and see if anything feels off about them." Ariel looked pleased. "That would be lovely. Is any chance I might join you?" Hermione's face fell, and Ariel backtracked quickly. "Oh, Harlow, it's all right. I understand. It would be like kissing your own father," Ariel said sagely. "What?" Hermione's face contorted wildly. Ariel looked regretful. "I've messed up my words, haven't I? I only meant that if I come to the book club, your conversation might not be as free with your words as if I were not there. As though you were kissing someone with your father in attendance." Hermione's expression softened as she fought a little smile. "I see what you mean. Yes, you might be right. Very well. I'll check back in with you after you've had a chance to meet with your book club," Ariel said. She walked back towards the front door. "In the meantime, I will consider what you said, Draco. Perhaps the other good places have had issues as well. I cannot visit them as I am not their architect, but perhaps I will think of something." Once they were alone, Draco and Hermione looked at each other in confusion. "What was that all about?" Hermione asked shakily. "She suspects Luna and Ambrose." Draco sighed deeply. "No, she suspects Pansy, and whoever Luna Lovegood really is. I've got a feeling Luna has just taken over the name, kind of like you did with Harlow." Hermione nodded in agreement. "Right, that makes sense. But this version of Luna doesn't know enough about the real Luna's backstory to fill in the true details, so she's putting in her own, like her actual parents' names. We need to get in touch with Ron and see if he can come tomorrow." "Should we ask Luna to come over as well?" Draco asked doubtfully. "No, I don't think so. If she is a stranger, I'd rather us be able to speak freely. We all know each other. Let's get a gauge on what's happening before we expand." "Agreed." He stretched, and then called Dobby. "Any chance we can get a clock in here? I know the construct of time is fluid here and all, but I just like knowing the hour." A chime and a regulator wall clock appeared on the wall nearest the table and chairs. 3 o'clock. Anything you would like to do?" she asked. "I wouldn't mind checking out that rabbit-shaped birthmark, if you're offering," he drawled. Her face burned as she looked down, hiding her smile. I thought I'd take Jim outside in the garden, but there's not much to it, the garden. Perhaps I'll just take him for a quick walk round the block." Draco nodded, an idea forming in his head. "Sounds smashing, Granger. I'll see you soon, yeah?" As soon as the door closed behind her, Dobby answered Draco's call once again. "I'd like to do a little project," he said to the elf being. Dobby nodded and smiled eagerly. When Hermione returned 30 or so minutes later, Draco met her at the door excitedly. "I've done something. I hope you don't mind." She looked at him warily. "All right, then. What is it?" She let him lead her to the back doors, her eyes closed so as not to spoil the surprise. At his instruction, she opened them. The garden, which once had a single spindly tree and sparse brush grass, was now lush and green. It was ringed by a large forest of oak, elm, maple, birch, and hawthorn trees, which grew high and thick enough to block out the sight of the other houses. Periodically, beds of phlox, vincas, and verbena dotted the landscape. There was a small rose garden, bushes of azaleas, gardenias, and camellias, stands of foxglove, lilies, and gladiolus. Overtaking one corner of the garden was a pond with a little waterfall, pink water lilies floating above colourful koi fish. A fire pit with Adirondack chairs sat off to one side, next to a small in-ground pool. Just outside of the house's double doors, a stone lanai was furnished with a comfortable set of sofas, chairs, and tables. A pergola featured a lush grapevine and was strung with fairy lights that would create a warm glow once it was dark. "I apologize for blending all sorts of different styles of gardens. I wasn't sure if you'd prefer a minimalistic Eastern look or an English rose garden or a bohemian space, to be honest," he said, uncertain now in the face of her silence. "My Jim, Draco, this is amazing," she breathed. She stepped out further to examine the beds of flowers closer. "And around here," he gestured to the right, tucked off to one side, "is a little raised garden with a few herbs as well. I know we don't have to cook or anything." She was choked up now, swiping at the tears that sprang to her eyes. It's perfect. My mum and I put an herb garden next to our house. When I was little, I miss it." She turned to him, throwing her arms around him tightly, pulling him to her. "Thank you so much for this. It's beautiful." Then she was kissing him, pressing herself to him with so much passion that Draco felt himself stir in his pants almost immediately. He pulled back a bit, so that perhaps she might not notice it, not wanting to scare her off. But she pulled him more firmly against her, moaning into his mouth as she did so. His own answering groan came from deep within his chest, causing her to shiver. His hands roamed from her waist to her bum, caressing the ample softness. Then they trailed down quickly to the backs of her thighs, where he gripped her and pulled, lifting her easily to settle her legs around his hips. He pulled back with a ragged breath, sucking in air as though he had just emerged from underwater. "Hermione, before we do this, where are we going with it?" She panted a bit breathlessly, her copper-brown eyes staring into his with so much desire that his cock was instantly throbbing. How did she do this to him so quickly? "The bedroom, I hope." He chuckled, enamored with her. "Yes, that sounds perfect, but I meant more in the relationship sense. I need you to know that, for me, this is more than physical." She bit her lip in a way that drove Draco slightly mad. "For me as well." That was enough for Draco to be getting on with. Holding his arms under her bum, he carried her back into the house, kicking the French doors closed with his feet, as she giggled against his lips. With her in his arms, he moved with determination down the short corridor, turning to push open the door with his bum as they kissed. He tossed her gently onto the bed. "Take off my clothes," she said, and for a split second Draco thought it was a command for him. He was wrong. Instead, the magic of the good place granted him his most inner desire yet. Hermione laid back on the bed in front of him, completely undressed. His eyes widened as he struggled to take in every inch of her at once. It felt as though he was looking into the sun, but he could not bring himself to look away. Then he dropped to his knees, his mouth trailing kisses up one creamy thigh, caressing her smooth calves in his large hands. Gently, he pulled at her legs, opening them to his wanting gaze. Her center, with its carefully cropped thatch of soft hair, glistened as she shifted, searching for the friction she needed. Draco's brain short-circuited in disbelief as he looked down at her. He was aware of an intense, internal buzzing sound, like the sound of 1,000 Cornish pixies spontaneously combusting, if he had to hazard a guess. He was living a dream, he thought. He was here, in bed with this beautiful, perfect woman, who had every right in heaven and on earth to hate him with all the fibers of her being, and yet, somehow, she did not. Not only did she not hate him, but she was willing to allow him to see her this way, so gorgeous and achingly desirous for him. He inhaled deeply, taking in the overwhelming and heady scent of her body. He wanted to drown his senses in her. The buzzing grew louder. "Ah, Draco!" she called wantonly. "Sweet Salazar, I love it when you say my name," he murmured, kissing her thighs feverishly, inching closer to her quim. Yes, but Draco, I think there's someone at the door," she said sorrowfully, as she sat up on her elbows. His mouth hovered just over her wetness, tongue caught between his teeth as he prepared for his first taste of actual heaven. He panted slightly, his breath ghosting over her body. "What?" he asked stupidly. Words had long ago ceased making sense to him. "The door! Oh, Godric, who now? Change clothes to jeans and blouse, with a bra and knickers." Immediately, Draco was caressing 2 denim-clad thighs. No, fuck no," he moaned, leaning his forehead down gently on her thigh. She sat up, pushing him off gently as she stood. "I've got to get the door, and I don't think you're in any right state to go," Hermione said, smiling down pointedly at his obvious erection, straining at the front of his trousers. She hurried quickly out the door of the bedroom, and Draco flopped face down onto the bed miserably. He kept getting so close, but happiness just kept getting snatched away from him. Weasley's grating voice carried from the living room. "Stopped by Weasley Manor just a little while ago. Wanted to know how I was getting on with my soulmate, Luna." Of course, it was the fucking weasel. After another minute or so, Draco thought things might have calmed down in his trousers enough to go out and converse with the others. "Where the hell have you been?" Weasley looked up at him in surprise. "In the bedroom," Draco answered tersely. "Why? Did I interrupt something?" The red-haired wanker asked in a slightly accusatory tone. "You did," Draco said simply, a smug smile playing at his lips. "Miney, if he's hurting you or putting you in an awkward position—" "Not yet, but hopefully soon enough, Weasley. What do you want?" Weasley's face flushed red with anger, but to his immense credit, he dropped the subject. "Ariel just came by my place. She seemed agitated, asking all sorts of questions about Luna. Did we get along? Were we compatible? Did she seem off to me?" "And does she?" Hermione raised a brow. Miney, I haven't a clue. I met the woman less than a week ago. I know her favourite colour is dark purple, and she likes strawberries, and that she's incredible at sucking... Weasley stopped himself, looking up as though he just remembered to whom he was speaking. Sewing, he finished lamely. Sure, Draco snorted. Weasley glared at him. The point is, I have no idea if she seems off. She seems very, willing, flirtatious with me. The idea that any woman would willingly flirt with Weasley seemed fairly off to Draco, but he wisely kept that idea to himself. Hermione told Weasley about their visit with Ariel. She thinks that something's wrong with the good place, and she suspects that a mistake has been made. There's a list of everyone that lives here, and we are ranked, graded. Apparently the bottom 4 on the list include Richard and Jean, who run the restaurants, and your Luna. Ariel thinks that perhaps one of them should not have made it in, and she came to us asking for help in rooting out the culprit. Who was the 4th? Weasley asked. Funny story, that. Draco took the question. It's a gentleman by the name of Ambrose. The only problem is the person living inside Ambrose is not Ambrose. It's actually Pansy Parkinson. The dumbfounded look on Weasley's face was definitely one for the memory books. He could feel the Cornish pixies in his brain producing sketch pads with pencils and charcoals to sketch the image quickly before it passed. You mean to tell me Pansy Parkinson, the girl who tried to turn over Harry to Voldemort, made it to the good place? Weasley sneered. Draco curled his own lip. It was little excuse, but he knew that Pansy had been fearful for her own life, and that of her family and friends at that low moment. Plenty of witches and wizards had made horrible decisions during that time. He knew Pansy had been quite repentant since then, and had done everything she could to make up for it. But it was Hermione who came to Pansy's defense. She did change, though. Remember, Ron? I know for a fact that she helped set up that wizarding orphanage after the war, and not just financially, either. I know she was volunteering there as well. It was a project I was involved in at the Department of Magical Outreach. Draco was surprised to learn this detail about one of his oldest friends, but did not let it show to the others. Pansy had always been such a private person, even to her closest companions. Weasley grimaced, but seemed to accept the argument. Fine. Pansy's a saint now. I got it. But why do you think Ariel wanted your help? Well, she gave the reason that we hadn't interacted much with the other residents yet, so we had no preconceived notions about them, Hermione said to Weasley. She turned back worriedly to Draco. And yet, now that I think of it, the 4 people she suspects are the 4 people we've had the most interaction with, aside from Ron. I think she suspects me as well. Draco grimaced. Not only you. Do you recall something she said to me during our discussion about my past? It reminded me of a comment she made the day I first got here. At the time, I was still rather out of it, just going along with everything that was being said, you know? Hermione nodded. That day, she said something about how I had always believed in egalitarianism. Weasley snorted in laughter, and Draco was mildly surprised that he knew what egalitarianism meant. He shot the red-haired git an ugly look, and went on. Today, she said something about how my colourful past was full of bravery and courage. Hermione tilted her head as though considering her words carefully. Well, I mean, you did... She started hesitantly, but Draco cut her off. Hermione, I know who I was. Let's not shine up the dragon's shirt and call it an egg, yeah?" They exchanged the tiniest of smiles, and she nodded. "So, where did she get this idea? She does call you Draco Malfoy, right?" Weasley asked. Draco nodded. "I think we need a few more answers. From our good friend, Dobby." The all-knowing being popped into existence with a chime, and Weasley's eyes grew round. "You didn't tell me your house elf was Dobby," he said to them accusatorially.
"Calm down, Ron. This is just the helper. Remember, it takes the form of whatever you found most helpful on Earth. This is the same as your mother. Your Rosie."
Hermione rolled her eyes at the man.
"No, Ro isn't my—"
But then Weasley broke off, realization dawning on his features. The Cornish pixies in Draco's brain turned to a fresh page in their sketchpads and started anew.
"What can Dobby do for Draco?"
the elf asked. "Dobby, are you able to show me scenes from my life? Just a bit about who I was, the major events and circumstances that shaped my belief system?"
"Of course, Draco. Shall I put it on the large screen?"
All four of them looked up at the gigantic screen, where three people screamed at each other angrily. One cried piteously on the sofa, whilst the other two charged towards each other to fight. Hermione spoke up hopefully.
"Dobby, can you take this television program off the screen?"
"Of course, if you wish it, Harlow."
"I wish it,"
Hermione said emphatically.
"Please, do that."
The screen turned mercifully blank for the first time since either of them had been here, and it was all Draco could do not to weep and applaud enthusiastically. "Thank you so much, Dobby. Now, you were going to show me something about my life."
"Yes, the good place has the ability to recreate moments from your life that were the most important to you. I have the highlights ready now. Shall I begin?"
Draco's stomach suddenly flipped. They were about to watch some gruesome stuff, he was sure. He had witnessed and had been on the receiving end of many acts of torture from Voldemort and Bellatrix in his life, not to mention the deaths of several people, magical and muggle alike. His home life had not been the best, either. He looked nervously at Hermione, knowing that their shared history had not always been pleasant. Still, it had been a paradise compared to the language and insults that his father and Lucius's friends had often indulged in. "Perhaps we shouldn't," Draco began, but it was Weasley's turn to cut him off.
"No, let's,"
the ginger tosser said snidely. All three of them moved to sit on the sofa, with Hermione sitting in the middle between the two men. The screen came to life in front of them. White letters scrolled across the black expanse. A disembodied voice read them aloud. "What you are about to see is a recreation of actual events. Real memories were taken to reconstruct these images to allow for the most objectivity. You will not view the events from inside your own head. Rather, you will see them from an outsider's point of view." The words disappeared, replaced by a familiar sight. All three of them recognized the Great Hall of Hogwarts. A line of black-robed children entered from a side door, led by Professor McGonagall, who carried a low stool and a tattered old hat.
"Oh,"
Draco heard Hermione breathe next to him. The image moved closer to the children, and Hermione giggled to see them all so young.
"My Jim, look at you, Draco. You look so young."
"And pointy,"
Weasley added unhelpfully.
"Look at my hair,"
she giggled, pointing.
And Neville! Oh my goodness, I forgot how chubby-cheeked he was. And there you are, Ron. You look so nervous. And you still had that smudge on your nose."
"You would have been nervous too. Fred and George told me I might have to fight a goblin during the sorting."
Draco suppressed a smile. He didn't have favourite Weasleys, but if he did, it probably would have been the twins.
"Where's Harry?"
Weasley asked then, leaning forward and squinting to scan the row of new Hogwarts students on the screen. Hermione craned her neck as well, whilst Draco did the same. Where was the scar-faced tosser? He didn't appear to be in the lineup, though some students stood in front of others. Perhaps they had just missed him. Then the scene jumped forward in time, as Professor McGonagall called out, "Draco Malfoy!" Young Draco looked back at the rest of the huddled first-years with a confident leer, and stepped up to the stool. In his mind, Draco remembered exactly how nervous he had been at that moment, though he had tried to project the utmost self-assurance. The sorting had settled around his ears, and Draco could remember how quickly it had been over and done with all those years before. The hat had barely had a moment's rest on his head before it had called out his house, Slytherin. But now, as they watched, the hat lingered, moving to and fro on his head, as it seemed to consider the options. Finally, the seam near the front of the hat opened and cried, "Better be Gryffindor!" Draco's bullocks contracted into his gut. The brain pixies froze. He felt his mouth fall open and heard Hermione gasp next to him. Further down the sofa, the weasel let out a low chuckle.
"Well, this should be good."
Thank you for listening to Everything is Fine by Great78. If you enjoyed this story and would like to read more like it, please find me on Archive of Our Own or follow my Spotify channel, Silver and Copper.